Exam. Radna, hello. All right, good. Can you guys tell me which country, which city you guys calling from, please? Hello. I don't know if you are hearing me.
Hmm.
Greetings, but yeah, but greetings from
Can you?
where? I want to know if you guys are hearing me. Actually, this is a sound check that I'm trying to do and see if we are interacting. Can you guys tell
Yeah,
me
just
where you're calling from?
let us know if you hear us. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Rohan.
Okay, gonna check it myself.
Yeah,
They can
I'm
hear us.
seeing
Ukraine. Okay, Dmitro says Ukraine. It means they can hear us.
somebody say Ukraine.
Yeah, Poltava, Ukraine.
I'm not seeing that one yet.
Florida, Ukraine. People can hear Mexico. Wow. Toronto. Can you see it, Andres?
No, I'm not seeing that yet. Oh,
California.
okay. So I can see it. I can see it on my computer, and
People can hear Mexico. Wow.
okay, and my computer is mute, and I can see it on my computer. So we can start from Austin, Texas, Brazil, Toronto, Ghana. Hey, I'm also from Toronto. Nice. From Mexico. Hola, Martin. Buenos días. All right, Teresa. I think we are ready to start. Please.
Okay, hi everyone. Hi again, or perhaps for the first time who just joined our series of the webinar. So, my name is Teresa. I'm driving marketing at Noltic, and I'm here with Andres, my friend already. Andres
Mhm.
has an awesome T-shirt, Brave Ukraine, because he wanted to support Ukrainians right now, Ukrainian Salesforce community, by sharing his knowledge and his experience. Andres has over 30 years of experience in the tech industry, and he knows a lot, and he's one of the top speakers probably at
Thank you.
Salesforce
Thank you.
industry. We met in Berlin for a few weeks ago, right?
Lovely.
And that was very lovely. And now we are cooperating together between Noltik and Andres to share his knowledge. But also, we are very happy to see all the international audience today. And I hope, Andres, you enjoyed the webinar. At the end, we're going to have a live Q&A. So guys, be active and just text your messages and your questions, your feedback. We would love to hear that. And yeah, Andres, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Teresa. Yes, it was definitely very lovely. I got the opportunity to be there in Germany a couple of weeks ago. But today we have a different story. We're going to talk about how do you copy data between the different orgs. Okay. And this is one presentation that is new. I haven't done it before. I built it just for this particular event to try to help out as much as I can from 1,000 miles apart the Ukrainian community, helping them at these very very difficult times. So my thoughts are with all the brave Ukrainians. So cheers, hats off to you guys, and for everybody else, I'm very very happy that you decided to come today and be here with us today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Andres Perez. I work for Salesforce, Senior Manager, Trollhead Academy, Solution Architect Lead. Very, very long title. Basically, my job is two different parts. One is to teach throughout a week. I teach different topics, and and I also work as an architect in some of the internal projects. I am Salesforce certified, and I live in Canada, Toronto, Canada. I saw a couple of you were from here as well. Nice. And I've been working for Salesforce since 2009. All right. So this is not really going to be a presentation about Salesforce. It's a presentation about a tool that I've built that I want to share with the community. So not sure if this slide is relevant, but just in case, don't make any purchase decisions based on how awesome Salesforce will be. Buy Salesforce for how it is today. On this particular session, we're going to talk about how do you copy data between orgs. So we're going to have to talk about sandboxes. We're going to talk about data. Salesforce has several solutions that can help you copy the data, but there are limitations with those solutions. And that was basically the reason why a few years back, 2018, I created a tool that we internally in Salesforce, in my team, we have been using extensively. So I decided to share it with the community, and we'll talk about that tool, which is called ETCopy Data. We'll actually do a demo, and then we'll have the floor open for Q&A. So if you guys have Qs, hopefully I'll have a lot of As for you. So let's begin with talking about sandboxes and data. We're going to talk about what is a sandbox, how do you copy data, what kind of things you have to take into account, what are the problems that you can have when you copy data, all of that stuff. So first of all, what is a sandbox? A sandbox is basically an environment that Salesforce provides for administrators and developers to help them build the applications. Now, users work in the production environment, but administrators and developers work on sandboxes. And the idea is that it will prevent you from writing changes directly in production and breaking production, because your users will not be very happy if you do that. Now, there's several types of sandboxes, including full copy, partial copy, developer pro, and there's another type of sandbox which is called scratch orgs. We'll talk about those as well today. Now, what gets copied? If you're using scratch orgs, nothing gets copied, no data, no metadata. For all the other sandboxes, you do get the metadata from the environment that you're cloning or copying from, but only full copy and partial copy will copy the data for you. So full copy will copy all the data, partial copy will copy some data based on some templates, but the developer pro, and scratch orgs don't get any data copied at all. So it is your job to make sure that you populate those sandboxes with data so that you can write code or maybe build flows or whatever else declaratively or programmatically, so that you can build your solutions. But you need data for that. So we're going to talk about how do you get the data copied. So this little table summarizes the different types of sandboxes and scratch orgs that Salesforce provides. The first row talks about the lifespan. The lifespan is how long will the org be alive for. When you're working with the scratch orgs, by default is 7 days, but you can set it for 1 day or up to 30 days. The other sandboxes don't really die until you refresh them. But you cannot refresh them every hour. The developer and the developer pro can only be refreshed once a day if you needed to. But for a full copy, you have to wait a full 30 days. Also, when you are refreshing them, when you're working with the scratch orgs, you work on that. They get provisioned in a matter of minutes, including loading the metadata and the data that you need, especially the data if you have a good tool like the one that we're going to talk about. For the other sandboxes, you get you can wait up to a few days until they actually are provisioned. The sandboxes, as we talk about, will get the data copy over from the environment that you are creating the sandbox from. And the Scratch orgs is based on the contents of your project. Now, with regards to the data, 3 out of 5, so 60% of these guys don't even have data loaded. Scratch orgs, the developer pro don't get any data copy over. So it's up to you to manually load the data. And if you want good data to be able to do your development, that's going to take a while, unless you use a tool. Full copy and partial copy, yeah, you get your data, and there's probably not a big deal with that. But you have to wait 30 days. Plus, you only get one full copy. Well, developer, you get a whole bunch of developer sandboxes. Last but not least is the size of the hard drive that you get with that. And that's important, of course, because you cannot load millions of records into that, because, of course, you will run out of hard drive. So a good amount of size of data depends on what your project requires, but it could be thousands of records on different multiple objects. All right. So now that we have the sandbox clear, let's talk about the copying of the data. Because again, remember that developer pro, and Scratch orgs don't get any data copy. So it is up to you to populate those orgs with data. A good idea is to have some data stored on your project's repo. So whenever you need to rebuild the Scratch org, or if you refresh your sandbox, you want to load that data, it's a good idea to have that data in a repo. Make sure the data is clean, obviously. So obfuscating some confidential information and so on. Now, copying the data is not quite so simple. We have multiple objects that need to be loaded. They must be loaded in specific order. I call this the anti-Titanic pattern, because basically you have to load the parents first and then load the children, which was the reverse of trying to save a boat. Usually it's the children first and then the parents last. But in the case of loading the data, it's the anti-Titanic pattern. I just have a funny phrase here so you can remember. Parents first, children last. Okay? So you have to have a specific order. Also, when you are having a sandbox, like a developer sandbox that has no data, well, you have to create the data. And when you create the data, Salesforce generates new Salesforce record IDs for those records that you're loading. Those IDs, the ones I'm talking about, are the 15, 18 characters that uniquely identify each record. They will be generated, but you need to use those values, the new values, on your foreign keys for your relationships. And that it's something that makes things a little bit complex. And we'll talk about this in just a little bit. But let's go back first to how should the objects be loaded. We have a very, very simple data model here. We have 6 objects. If you take a look at them and you answer the question, which order would you use to load these objects? Well, first, you must load the accounts. Because if you don't load the accounts, you cannot have any contacts related to accounts that don't exist yet. So now we can load the accounts. Can we load the cases? Well, not really, because the cases have a foreign key, a lookup into contacts. So first, we must load the contacts before we can actually load the cases. Now that we have the cases loaded, maybe we can now load the case comments. What about campaigns and opportunities? Which ones would you load first? And the answer to that is you will load the campaigns first, and then you will load the opportunities. Pretty straightforward, I think, except if you have some complex type of relationships. You can have a relationship, which is called a self relationship, between an account and its parent account. So in that case, you cannot just load all the accounts, because how are you going to do with the children? Well, accounts, well, you have to load the parents' accounts first. What about the grandparents or the great-grandparents, right? So there's a level of complexity when it comes to dealing with sales relationships. Also, what I'm calling here a bi-directional relationship. So we know that accounts has contacts. Okay, there's a standard relationship in Salesforce, standard lookup, that has a foreign key field on the contact object called the account ID, which reference to the ID of the account. And that's why you have to load the accounts first, and then you can load the contacts. But let's suppose that we have a bi-directional relationship where the accounts will have a foreign key which indicates which one is my primary contact. Okay, if I want to reach to one of my contacts on the account, who do I reach? Well, that will be the primary contact. But you cannot load contacts. You cannot load accounts and populate the primary contact before you can load the contacts. Or you cannot load the contacts before you load the accounts, because you cannot have the account ID, right? So there's an issue here with that complexity, of course. Now, and I'm only talking about 6 objects, something very, very simple. But in reality, if you take a look at the architect diagrams that Salesforce give us for the cloud, Sales Cloud, there's another one, different objects for Service Cloud. So in this case, which one is the parent? Which ones you load first? Which ones you load second? Right? So it's not that simple anymore. Right? We'll take a look how this can be solved in a little bit. For now, just expose the problems. The second problem that we're talking about is that there must be an order in which you load your objects. Let's, for a minute, think that we're loading accounts. I have 3 accounts with primary key A1, A2, A3 for account 1, account 2, account 3. And similarly, I have a table of contacts that I also need to load. And for those contacts, I have contact 1, contact 2, and contact 3. Notice that account ID indicates the ID. And in this case, obviously, I'm just saying A1, A2, A3, but this will be 15, 18 characters ID that Salesforce generates, right? So contact 1 corresponds to account 1 in this particular case. Contact 2 to account 2, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to load this data into a new Sandbox. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we know that we have to load the accounts first. So let's do that. But notice here that the IDs that get generated are different from the ones that we had originally, right? So now we're not doing A1, A2, A3. We're doing A9, A8, A7. So when we load the contacts, what is the value that we have to put in the field, the account ID? We cannot use A1, A2, and 3 because Salesforce will actually give you an error saying, I do not know any of accounts with those IDs. So you need to put in there the values for A9, A8, and A7. This is a complex problem that happens quite often actually in production for users, and they have a solution for that. Salesforce has a solution for this, which is using external IDs. Now, I'm not recommending, I'm actually discouraging you from just creating external IDs on your objects so that you can load your test data. If your production needs external IDs, if your users has business reasons, use cases in which external IDs are required, then by all means, go ahead and build them. But if your data needs to be loaded, and for that, you need to create external IDs, I do not think that's a good idea. All right, so we've seen the need of creating data or loading data into Works because we have sandboxes. We also saw a couple of the problems that are critical when you're loading data into sandboxes. So let's take a look, step back, and let's take a look and see what type of solutions Salesforce provides for us. And how we can and what type of limitations there are with these solutions. So Salesforce has 5 different solutions for this. You may know some of these already. You have dataloader.io, data loader, Apex Code, SFDX commands, and Salesforce is another tool which is called Datafall, which is Salesforce intra-org data migrator tool. Very long and complex name, but usually it's called Datafall. So let's take a look at each of them, describe them very, very shortly, and see if this tool is a good solution for what we're trying to build, which is copying the data into a sandbox. So the first tool we're going to talk about is called the dataloader.io. This tool is based on like a web-based UI, so basically it runs on your browser, which means you can't automate it. And also, when the records get loaded, then you have to manually fix the foreign keys, fix the IDs that we talked about earlier, that goes from A1, A2, A3 to A9, A8, A7, right? So that has to be manually loaded. So once manually handled. So once you load the data, you have to get the data back, import it into Excel, massage it, and then put it back. So you have to manually do something about that. So it's not going to help us because of that. The second tool that Salesforce has is Data Loader, which is a tool that runs in your computer, not in your browser. And it can be scripted. There is a way they can actually script this. But we have the same problem. You have to manually fix the foreign keys. I've seen in the community a solution that looks something like this. With Apex, you create a data structures so that you can easily link the data and fix the problem with the IDs, because it would allow you to get the newly created ID. So I'm not going to go much in detail in this code, but if you look in lines 2, we're defining a map of accounts, and we have some keys here, A1, A2, and A3. And we're going to insert the values. When we do an insert in Apex, the account record gets assigned the ID that was just created. Then when we load the contacts, we say, give me the new ID for the account 1. And it will be account 9 based on the previous slides that we talked about earlier, or A2 will be A8 and A3 will be A7. So it will give you those IDs, and now you can load your contacts. Now, what's wrong with this? Well, actually, it's quite fine because this code can be automated and run when the sandbox is a refresh or the scratch or is created. It will fix the foreign keys. The new record IDs, as I explained before, are properly managed. Now, it doesn't really help with those complex relationships, the self relationships or the bidirectional relationships. And you, as a developer, must write and maintain this code. What if you want to add new fields? It starts getting more into writing code, which of course takes time from what you should be writing, which is the code for your project, not the code just to load the data so that you can write the code. So maybe not quite the perfect solution. Now, yes, SFDX have some commands that allows you to work with data. The different commands that Salesforce has, it's SFDX force data record. This is a tool, command that allows you to work with one record. So eventually you could write some scripts that work on one record at a time and load your data that way. But I think we're back into writing the code in Apex, kind of the same type of complexity, writing code, which just to load data is probably not going to be a great idea. Plus, it's one record at a time, so it will take a long time to run. The second command that could probably help is bulk SFDX force data bulk, import and export and all that stuff. it has the same similar issues as data loader. You need to determine the order, and you need to work with the manually fix the IDs. There's another command, which is data force data so-called query, which allows you to extract data, extract but not import. So obviously that will not help us much. There is one that very, very closely resembles to what we can use for our issues, which is copy the data, which is the force data tree export and force data tree import. This one works much, much better because it will determine the order in which the records need to be loaded, and it will fix IDs. But it only works if you're able to write a single so-called query to get the data out into a file, which will then be used to import the data. But for this very simple data model, you can't really write one so-called query because you cannot go 2 levels down, and you cannot go down and then up. So you cannot write one single so-called query. You can write multiple so-called queries, but then you're going to have to worry about the IDs that are created. And of course, we're back to square one. Because remember that with so-called queries, you can build relationships, queries that are 5 levels up or 1 level down. All right. Number 6, it's a last but not least, is a tool that Salesforce tried to build, or maybe even built, for solving the problem that copying data to brand new sandboxes or to scratch orgs. The tool is called, just call it Datafall. Google it and you'll find it. There's a couple of things. It's an open source tool, which is great. You can actually take a look into a Java code if you want to and help write additional code for that. But one of the things is that it was last updated in 2019. So it came with a lot of strength. They did a lot of work, but they haven't touched it since 2019. And actually, I went into the issues, and there are some issues that are still pending because this tool is not supported by Salesforce. It was written by the Salesforce community, I guess, but it was not built. It's not supported by Salesforce. And actually, there's an issue, which is quite critical, I think, is that the tool doesn't work with APIs greater than 46. And right now, in summer 22, we're in version 55. So this tool stopped working quite a while ago. So we still have the problem. And Salesforce doesn't really have good answers for us. I mean, Salesforce is awesome. I love it. And actually, I do work for it. But I love the flexibility and the power that it has. But in this particular use case, I think that there's things that could be done better. And actually, I did it. I built a tool that allows you to easily copy data into scratch orgs or sandboxes, or maybe even production. We'll talk about that, which is called ETCopyData. So we're going to talk about what is ETCopyData, how do you install it, how do you configure it, and then we'll do a short little demo for that. So what is ETCopyData? Well, basically, it is an SFDX plugin that makes loading your data into a sandbox or into any org, basically, very, very easy to do. It was first released publicly. We had been using it before for some of our internal projects, but it was released first publicly on 2018 as a GitHub repo. And I went in, and in order to make this presentation, I went in there and reviewed some of the issues that people have been complaining, and tried to come up with better way of doing things. And those issues have been solved. So I overhauled the tool, and I created, including the fact that now SFDX wants to use the new CLI called Oaklave. All right, so it was overhauled basically by this presentation. I want to, if there's a lot of traction and people start using it, and please let me know in LinkedIn or whatnot if you're actually using it. And if you find issues, let me know, and I'll try to go back and keep that fixed and working. So what does the tool do? Well, the first thing that it does, it connects to an org, which is your source org, where your data resides. This could be a production or it could be another Sandbox, and exports the data and puts it into JSON files. We'll take a look at those in just a little bit. Puts it into your repo. It doesn't obfuscate the data, so make sure that you do that. Any type of a field that it's confidential, the best I can do is you can ignore those fields from being exported. But if you want them to be, if there are required fields or whatever, you better obfuscate them on your repo, and then you can load that data anytime you want. It also compares the source and the destination metadata. Now, the orgs, the source and the destination, must have the same objects and the same fields, including the permissions that you have on those objects and those fields. Because if you don't have permissions in one of the fields, and ETCopyData uses the standard APIs, it's going to try to look into the field. The field is going to show up as it doesn't exist, because a standard API is run on what is called user mode. So even though the field is there, make sure that whoever's logged in has access to those fields. Now, if there's any differences, I am going to report them, and you can take a look at the logs, what fields have been changed or have been omitted, and but they will not prevent you loading the data. It will only load the fields that it matches. Okay. Now it only connects to the source org to check to see the schema, the definition of those fields. It doesn't connect to get the data. The data comes from from your project that you have in your repo. All right, so the differences are reported, but they will not prevent you loading the data because it only loads the data that matches. Same fields in the destination, and source and destination will be loaded. It will then allow you to import the data while solving the issues that we have been previously discussing, including the order. It will automatically detect which objects needs to be loaded in which order, and it will handle the IDs, even for those complex self relationships, or what I'm calling the bi-directional relationships. You can get access to that repo if you want to in GitHub. It's public, but in order to install it, you basically need to write one sfdx command, which is sfdx plugin install ETCopyData. That will install that plugin on your org, and that's basically all you need to do. If you want to play with the code is freely available. You just need to clone it, do an npm install, and then do a link. The cool thing about the link is that if you make changes to your code and to the code, and you rerun the tool, it's going to execute your changes, not the ones that you downloaded. So it's because it's running in JavaScript. JavaScript is not really a compiled language. It's an interpreted one, and any changes will actually take effect immediately. So if you want to play with it, feel free to do that. All right. Now, ETCopyData is fully configurable. We have command line arguments. We need to talk about which folders and files structure it uses, and a very important file, which is called the ETCopyData JSON. Now, there are 5 different commands that you can execute: compare, export, import, delete, and full. And full, what it does is exports and imports in one single shot. So the fall is the only one that actually reads the current data from the production environment and loads it in. It loads the data from the source org and immediately imports it into the destination org. Everything else is split in pieces. You export it and you put it into the repo. The next day, you import it from the repo. If you want to start from clean, you can actually delete all the data in the destination org. This one has a security check that it will not allow you to delete production data, for obvious reasons. But you can delete from anything that is not a production environment. And actually, when you import, the first thing that it does, if you decide to do so, and it's not a production environment, is that it will delete all the records and then it will load the records for you. Okay. Now, those 5 commands work in very, very same function. You have SFDX, ETCopyData, export. You provide a C or configure folder, which is a path where you can find the ETCopyData JSON file, which drives all your logic. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. You can change through a CI/CD, for example, which is going to be your source org and which is going to be your destination org. You can actually request data to be printed out to you back in JSON, so you can take a look at basically what it shows you is how many records were inserted or deleted depending on the operation, and then log level, and you can see everything that is happening if you make it very verbose or just give you fatal or errors or whatnot, and then work like that. So you can fine-tune how much information you get from the logs through a command or parameter named the log level. And the values are trace, and you get everything. Debug, you get less. Information, you get less. Warn, error, and fatal. All right, the folders, it's on your repo. You're going to have a data structure that looks something like this, where you have a folder for your source. In this case, I'm doing PR for production, ETCopyData, and I have the files in JSON stored here. And that's the data that was exported from your production environment. And this is the data that you can actually obfuscate. Then you have the destination, which is in this case SO for Scratch org or SB for Sandbox. That's a nomenclature that I use for the destination org. And then you have the ETCopyData JSON, which is a very important file that drives the whole configuration of the operations that you're running. So let's take a look at that file a little bit closer. The ETCopyData JSON is a JSON file that has few pieces of information. It has what is the environment where you're getting the data from, what is the environment you're getting your data to. You have an array of objects where each object will have what's the name. Even if it is a custom object, you can have like link _ C, which fields you don't want to export, assuming that you have confidential information that you don't want to export, you can put in there. If you're gonna do complex relationships like self relationships or bidirectional, you need to indicate the fields that are gonna be special. That it's gonna be in the 2 pass reference fields. You can filter which data you get exported, only data that meets this particular criteria. And then you can order that data if you want it. And that goes for each of the objects that you are exporting. You must indicate all the standard objects that you want exported because Salesforce has thousands of different standard objects, and you need to indicate which ones you want. You can indicate which of the custom objects you want, or as I'll show you in just a little bit, you can indicate just bring me all the custom objects. Okay, but you cannot say bring me all the standard objects because there are a gazillion of them. So that's the SObjects data. The next section here in line 86 is the metadata. Now the metadata is it's special type of records that you don't really load, but you deploy, including like record types or maybe users you create when you refresh your sandbox. The same users get copy over, of course. But the users that get copy will get a different ID in your sandbox than in your original environment that you create the sandbox from. So you need to match the users by maybe the email, assuming that all your users have different emails. Which fields you want to export? You can do a where, you can do an order by. Similarly, for the record type, a good field to match by is the developer name, right? And what do you want to export, and so on. Also, we have a root folder. You can specify where is your data going to be, where is your source and your destination folders. By default, it will be in a folder named ETCopyData. You want to include all the custom objects, yes or no? Which are the custom objects you want to include? So you can say all except these 3, right? Rather than listing 50, if you have 50, instead of listing 47, it's probably easy to list 50 and say except these 3 objects, if you want. Would you like to stop on errors? I recommend you do, but if you just want to skip over them, you can just say false. Which fields you want to ignore? This one applies to all the objects, standard and custom, you want to ignore. Are you trying to copy data to production? It is possible to copy data to production with this tool. It will not be deleted, and it will make sure that it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Are you totally sure? Are you absolutely sure? Before it actually messes up with the data in production. Actually generates a number randomly that you have to type in and make sure that you are awake, basically. So there's a safety for that, because oh god, I've messed up things in the past. You can also have a two path reference fields. Those are those special relationships like self relationships or bidirectional, and that would apply to all the different objects. So you can specify for each object, or you can say for all of them. Do you want to delete the data in the destination? You can say true, except if it is production. In production, you must say false. Do you want to use the bulk API? True or false? If you use false, then it will use the REST composite API. And then if you're using the bulk, what is the timeout I want to wait for the completion of that request? Okay, so fully configurable tool that allows you to basically export and import the data. Now, what I want to do is to do a little quick demo to go over how this is actually executed. And you can see here that I have a folder which has a few, actually it's called few. So my configuration here will have to be named few to reference to that folder. My source is production. My destination is Sandbox. So these are the records I want to load. And it needs a folder to store things like the user records and the record type ID in order to configure and do the mapping. And it has also a file which is called the org, which basically describes the schema of your org on the destination and on the source. And these are the objects I'm loading: entitlement, opportunity, case, and I mean also importing some custom objects as well. We'll take a look at that data in just a little bit. So the first thing I can do here is I'm actually going to open a org, which is going to be my source org. So then in here I can say SFDX force open production. And then production org should be opening right here in just a little bit. Takes a couple of seconds, but it will be there. This is my production environment, which is my source of the data. I have accounts. Notice that the accounts have some parent account that it has the primary contact. So those relationships that we talk about that they were complex, have your contacts, your cases, your opportunities. And we also have another objects here. We'll talk about them in just a little bit, which are links A, B, and C. All right, so that's the data that I'm loading. I'm going to be loading those into a sandbox that I just refreshed. So I'm going to use another command, which is force org open and opening the sandbox. So if I give that a little bit of time, there should be a tab opening in the browser with the destination environment. And just to show that this account, it's actually, let's switch because you're going to say that's not the one. All right, so there's no records here, or maybe it's I have a filters. Show me all the records. So it shows all the records. There's no records here. There's no accounts. There's no contacts. There's no cases. There's no opportunity. There's no data at all. All that data has been deleted. Okay, so it's empty because I just refreshed the sandbox. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's give it a little bit of space for the log to write, because the next step I'm going to do is to execute a command, which is sfdx ETCopyData import. The configuration file can be found on this folder, which is ETCopyData JSON. Do a trace, so do as verbose as possible, print out the whole thing, and at the end give me the result in JSON. How many records did you import for which object? And if I execute that, then after a few seconds it will start and it will show me my configuration from the JSON file. It will tell me that it found these particular objects on the sandbox. It found these objects on the production environment, and then it's going to query and delete records, but there is 0 records that needs to be 0 records that need to be deleted, because I show you that I just refreshed the sandbox, so it's empty. It's going to tell me that it's important. Come on, don't do that. Oh, okay. It's important. All the data here is verbose, so it's printing out everything. Let's see if I can fix it a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. So it's importing all the cases and imported all the opportunities. It also imported all the it updated the, where is it? Updated the primary contact, which is the bi-directional relationship. So the old ID was this. Now it gets, this is the new ID that gets mapped. This is the one ID that was generated by Salesforce. In the data, we had this ID, but obviously we had to change that lookup relationship to use this key rather than using this key, of course. And then it says that it updated all those records. It changed the relationship for the different objects that I'm going to talk about in just a little bit, link A, B, and C. And at the end, it tells me that it imported 142 accounts, 5 link A, 5 link B, and 5 link C, 25 link C, 266 contacts, 102 cases, almost 500 opportunities for a total of 1,039 records that were loaded. If we go back in here and we look for this, here we see that it loaded the opportunities with the related accounts. Similarly for cases, it loaded all these cases with the related, actually not this list view, but a different list view, with the related contact and account. Oh, it doesn't show the account. Okay. Contacts, it shows accounts with the corresponding parent account for some of them. Not everyone had a parent account. Some of them had a primary account, primary contact, so I got that relationship. So it loaded the data, it fixed the issues that we have, which is it created or it maintained the relationships, even though the IDs were newly generated. It determined in which order the data had to be created. And yep, basically that's all that happened there. So let's review. We loaded the data into a Sandbox. We could have done the same process to load data into Scratch.org, or maybe even production, except for the deletion. It doesn't delete any data in production, obviously. So ETCopyData determined the order to import the data, because it had to delete it first. The reverse order is it's applied when you're deleting. It deleted all the destination because we are not in a production environment, and because we say delete all, although we had none. Then imported into a destination org, which was a Sandbox, but we could have used a Scratch org or a production environment. And then using the two pass reference fields, which is defined on the ETCopy JSON file, it helped with those self relationships and the bidirectional relationships. And then finally, last but not least, it displayed the record counts. I show you that I had a couple orgs. This is the export org list. One not related with ETCopy data, but a good tip that I always use. The first two letters of the SFDX alias indicates what type of org it is, so I can easily determine if this is a production environment, if it is a dev hub, if it is a Sandbox, or maybe if it is a Trollhead playground org, and if it is a Scratch org. So I was able to load this data with very complex relationships, including the parent ID self relationship and the primary contact, which is that bidirectional, with different children, which would not be possible to load with a simple SOCO query, because you cannot go 2 levels down. And the one that I never really show you the data for, didn't really make sense until we actually see this particular picture, is that I have 3 objects which are tied together in a very crazy way. I did this for testing. I don't think there's a real use case where you will ever have this level of complexity, but the tool supports it, even if it is this level of complexity. And that's it. So first of all, thank you for watching. Second, if there are any Qs, I will be very, very happy to have As. The first question is always, will these slides be shared? And the answer is yes. This video is being, this LinkedIn Live is being recorded. I will put a link on one post that I will create later when I have the link. You'll have the slides on the repo with ETCopy data, and you have a link on that same repo, so you have access to all of this stuff. And if there's any Q&A, if there's any Qs, I'll be happy to have the As. Hopefully I have the As. So if you have any Qs, post them in there. Teresa, do you know if there were any questions while I was talking?
Yeah. You can hear me right now?
I can hear you. Did you lose me? No.
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
So yeah, looks like there was no questions during the event. But guys, if you have questions, then just type in the chat that you can see.
All right. Apparently, maybe there's not. I don't see any. Do you see any?
There is a question right now.
There is a question.
Yeah.
Can you read it to me, please? Because I don't see it.
Sure. Thanks for the demo, Nazar says. Are there any limitations on the type of object the tool can handle? For example, can it export, import records that store historical data, like account history object?
It could export it, but it's not going to be able to import it, since that's that's a very good question. It cannot be imported since that records are read-only, and Salesforce uses them for auditing. So you cannot just blame anybody that they broke the data. So for those objects, I guess you could definitely export it, but there's no way that you can import it because Salesforce doesn't allow you to create records for that. Great question. Thanks, Teresa.
Awesome. There is another question from Alexei from Noltic. Thank you very much for presentation. Did you use a Salesforce DMU plugin, a data move utility? If yes, could you please compare it to ETCopy Data?
If I use which tool, I'm sorry?
So it's about Salesforce data move utility plugin.
I did not. I haven't heard about that one.
Yeah.
So I cannot compare it in.
Any other questions, guys?
If not, we'll just wrap up, and feel free to drop me a line. Follow me on LinkedIn. Drop me a line. Ask me questions. I'll be very, very happy to help you guys out. And yeah, I hope to see
Thank you,
you guys
Andres.
next time. Thanks.
Yeah, and we're gonna have another session with Andres in September, most of all. I think on the beginning. So yeah, stay updated, stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andres, a lot. Bye, everyone.
Bye.